Broadcasting from the Tazin Lake Lodge studio, this is Sporting Journal Radio. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Now here's your host, Bret Amundson.
Oh, that's right. Welcome to another show here. I'm sorry, I'm a little sweaty not because we're working that hard on the radio show. I mean, we've been working really hard here on the show lately, but I'm completely addicted to these. They are Smokehouse, Blue Diamond Smokehouse almonds. The extremes. Cayenne pepper. I saw them, I had to have them. But I'm definitely on fire right now. So, sorry. I should really be more professional about this and not eat while I'm doing the radio show or the TV show. If you're watching this, I apologize. But welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. In our new studio, Dan Amundson is with us. As always, Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing really, really well.
Good. Welcome to the show. Dan and I have been pretty busy the last couple of days. Dan, I appreciate the help that you've been putting in here the last couple of days, because if you notice, we got some new digs, kind of, sort of. We rebuilt the studio here, kind of, sort of. I don't know if rebuilt's the right word for it, but kind of redesigned it just a little bit. And it's, I think, always the best ideas come late at night. What was it, a Friday night?
I don't even know. Can't remember. It was a nighttime.
Let's see what happened. Oh, Dan, you know what? What time is it?
10:27.
10:27. Friday night. What are we doing?
Well, we should be on the bar. But we're going to make studios.
So we're going to make a studio. So right now, this is kind of, it's a mess, obviously. And but that's kind of where we record the show right now. And I've been wanting to record it over here for a long time. So Dan, you know what we're going to do tonight?
We're going to make it so we can record over there.
I like it. So, I mean, there it is. We've got a lot of work to do yet to it here, but overall, we're in our new studio. It's still kind of a work in process, but I kind of like it, Dan. It's nice.
It is nice. I've got a fancy camera I'm looking into. I'm in control of the show. If I want to mute you, I can mute you or delete you. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, that's a little scary.
It should be. It's fun having this much power. I'm enjoying it.
Well, welcome to this week's show. We got a lot to get to. This week, Henry Drews is going to be on the show. Now, his name's been around. He's been kind of making the rounds a little bit, and he had a recent article in Outdoor News regarding some potential changes within the DNR. Now, he's a longtime DNR guy in the fisheries, managing fisheries up in the northwest part of the state. He's with the DNR. Thank you. That moment brought to you by Diet Mountain Dew. Anyway, he retired. He just recently retired, so he's got some strong opinions about the future of the DNR. Should we be worried? Should we be concerned about what's going on within this potential restructuring and potentially some new funding sources for the DNR? We'll ask him about it and find out what he thinks the DNR should do moving forward. Also, Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism is going to join us. He's going to talk about fishing up on Lake of the Woods and what it's like right now, and a very important event that just took place regarding veterans. With all that's been happening in the news, let me just say once again, I can't say it enough, for any veteran out there, I don't care where you served, how long you served for, thank you very much for your service. If you did serve in Afghanistan, thank you very much. It was very important work that you did over there. And That was a big topic of discussion up at Lake of the Woods lately with all the veterans that were up there. So we'll ask Joe about that and how it went with his veterans at the Pay It Forward event that took place up there at Lake of the Woods. Dan, who's this show brought to you by?
Yeah, as always, Lake of the Woods Tourism. Plan a trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort on Devil's Lake. Plan a trip to Devil's Lake at haybellheights.com. OnX Hunt, know where you stand with OnX. Our favorite TV show, Prairie Sportsman. Watch episodes at Prairie Sportsman at any time at prairiesportsman.org. The Woods Outdoor Expo hunting event on September 9th, 10th, and 11th in Warrow. Don't forget about that big novice goose calling contest. And then midnight.
Surprises.
Yeah. And then Mid-Migration Outfitters. Hunt geese out of at the famous Lac Parle Refuge out of heated pits and comfortable blinds out here on the refuge. We'll be doing a little bit of guiding this fall. Come hunt with us. Find more information at midmigrationoutfitters.com. And then, of course, Tazin Lake Lodge. Go check out the Tazin Lake experience on the Tazin Lake YouTube page and TazinLakeLodge.com.
And I want to say Otter Tail Lakes Country, too, our friends up in Otter Tail County, of course. And speaking of Tazin Lake, I know, Dan, I'm going to go off script here for just a second, but the new Tazin TV episode aired this week. It was episode 4 of 6, so there's 6 new episodes of Tazin TV. And I was pretty excited about this one, episode 4, because I caught the biggest pike of my life. And it was 50 inches, and this is what it looked like.
But as a whole, as we got into it, water temperatures were slowly climbing. We got into some optimum temperature of water, and the unthinkable happened. They're hungry. They're taking it all the way.
So now we've worked our way around the aquarium pretty good. We haven't had any big fish yet, but we've been catching a lot of little ones. We've been saving one of the best spots of the bay for last. And while Trevor's dealing with a small pike off screen, I hook into one that doesn't feel very big at first, but as it gets closer to the boat, I realize it's a good fish.
Good pike. Good pike. Big pike. Good fish, buddy.
Now, I knew this was a big fish, but I didn't realize how big. So I'm one hand in the rod, I'm getting cameras turned on, all while the fish is thrashing and coming out of the water behind me. Had I known it was going to be this big, I probably would have been a little more careful.
Hey, Bret, what happened there?
We got a good fish.
Oh, yes.
We got a good one.
What'd you get him on?
So I'm throwing this storm plastic with a paddle tail. It's a little pike.
Pike flavor.
Yeah, and we've been in this spot here. The wind's blowing in. It's kind of shallow. Actually, it's flooded into this grass
It
here.
drops off, yeah.
And
Nice.
we've been catching a lot of little pike. When this guy hit it, he hit it coming towards the boat. So I was like, at
Cuts
first
off.
I thought it was another little one.
Yeah.
Then he got next to the boat, and I saw how big he was.
And he said, oh, that's a big one. Oh, watch the boat there, Bret. Nicely done. You get a good hook set in there?
I think I got a decent one. Come up to the surface.
Oh, yeah, he's a nice one. Oh, he's got a big mark, too. He's pretty. You lift him? Oh, you missed him. You gotta lift their head.
It's close again. Try this time.
Okey-dokey. Oh, he said, ha-ha. Nice pike. Way to go, Bret. Wonder what happened to his back, though, eh? Boy, oh boy, he got beat up. Hey, you lift. Yeah, he's a nice one, buddy. Very nice. Nice. Way to go, Bret. Hey. Woo.
That could be new personal best there, Trevor.
You're sitting 4.5, right?
4, 5.5.
Oh, yeah, I bet you it is. And it had to wait till we come back to the aquarium to do it, Bret.
That's right.
During my first day at Tazin Lake Lodge, our trip to the aquarium was a special one. I caught a 40-inch pike as soon as we got into the bay that came completely out of the water. And at one point, Trevor and I both doubled up on fish over 40 inches. It was unreal. But none of them would compare to the fish Trevor's now pulling out of this net.
Make you squeeze the tail together.
What?
Trevor, that's a 50-inch fish.
Come on.
50 inches.
Squeeze it tight and flat.
Yeah.
All the way down, flat.
There you go. One more quick one. Yeah.
That's 50.
50 right on the nose, he said.
Woo! That's a new personal best pike here. For me, huge fish here at Tazin Lake.
Oh.
It's a great fish. We're going to get it back in the water. Tazin Lake Lodge.
Right on.
Beauty, buddy. Beautiful monster, a class in its own, northern pike. Big, fat, healthy pike. Man, it was a beautiful fish.
Yeah, unreal 50-inch pike. Like, it still hasn't sunk into me, I don't think, yet that I caught a northern pike that big. Tazin Lake Lodge. Watch that episode now on the Tazin Lake Lodge YouTube or Facebook page. You can watch episode 4 of this year's Tazin TV, and then episode 5 coming up Tuesday night. And I mean, the trout fishing, you should see the trout fishing in that episode, and then the trout fishing continues. In fact, we start jigging for the biggest lake trout on the planet. It's unreal, so check it out. Tazin Lake Lodge. Dan, earlier this week, we got to do a little bit of dove hunting. The best time of the year is here. I mean, we'll talk fishing all year long, but really it's going to be a lot of hunting content from here on out because hunting seasons are here. We kicked it off with the dove season on the 1st, and of course, the early teal in Minnesota is kicking off here this weekend on the 4th, along with the early goose here in Minnesota as well. But going back to dove season, I brought Tiny out for her second hunt ever. Technically, she came out for a pigeon hunt for a little tune-up, and this is her first real hunt where it kind of counted, and it kind of was good. This is what it looked like. I had to bring the old lady to you.
Sit.
Ready, Dan? Dead bird. Tiny. Meow. That's the 2 5s. I'm gonna get up. There it is. Good. Good. Here. Good. Here. This is why I need to work on force fetch right here. There you go. Good. Good. Here. Heel. Don't destroy it, please. Here. Here.
Chomp, chomp,
Here.
chomp, chomp.
Here. Heel. 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 Good. Sit. Good. Hey. Here. Sit. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Well, I mean, most of the breast is still there. Hey, we got to work on chewing that bird up, but good job. Better than all the.
Well, there you have it. So I got some work to do, and honestly, that's on me for not working on force fetch a little bit more. She was chomping that bird pretty good, but overall, she stayed steady through the gunshots. I was Tony Crotty smashing that dove, by the way. Nice shot, Tony, and sorry for what Tony did to your dove. But she brought it back. She only dropped it once or twice on the way back, which is a big improvement from the last hunt with pigeons. So it just takes time out there in the field and time in the backyard. So I got some work to do, but overall I was pretty happy with her abilities out there for the dove opener. Dan, what's going on around the region right now?
Yeah, there's news all over the place all the time, of course. But we'll start with North Dakota. This came out, I sent this out in our newsletter this week, so some of you probably already seen this. But EHD, that nasty disease in whitetail, they found that again out in North Dakota, out in the Bismarck-Mandan area. Last year they offered a few refunds to deer hunting licenses. No word on whether or not they'll do that again this year, but something to keep an eye on if you're in that region. It's nasty, nasty stuff. Let's slide down to South Dakota. They're trying out, they just announced this a few days ago. This is something Minnesota talked about with our waterfowl regulation changes. It was that 3 duck splash limit. And South Dakota's going to give it a shot. So basically, if you haven't heard what that is, it's you can choose. You have to pick when you buy your license if you're going to do the splash limit or regular limit. And if you do the splash, you can shoot 3 ducks a day, regardless of species or gender. So you could go out and shoot 3 mallard hens or 3 hen bluebills or whatever you want. 3 ducks, that's all you get. So they're going to give that a shot. The hope is to be able to increase hunter participation. They think one thing that might be hindering new waterfowl hunters is the ability to identify ducks. And this takes that out. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about limits, just shooting 3 ducks. So they're going to give that a shot. We'll slide over on to our neighbors across the St. Croix River in Wisconsin. And they're kicking off their early teal season, got underway earlier this week on September 1st, while the rest of us had to wait for the weekend. They've been doing this for a few years, and people are loving it, and so they're underway, along with their dove season and early goose season. They are well underway into their hunting seasons, just like we are getting into now this weekend. But yeah, that's what's going on around with our neighbors in the Midwest.
Minnesota Department of Natural Resources put out a press release recently and have been doing a big kind of PR blitz about needing some new funding sources to fund the DNR and the management that we have for our resources here in Minnesota. And there's also a restructuring possibility of merging some managerial offices. this is what they said. Minnesotans have a right to and deserve a wide variety of outdoor recreation and nature experiences, equitable access to public lands and resources, healthy, diverse, and thriving natural resources, benefits from functional ecosystems, including clean water and air, regardless of their direct use. Should we be concerned about this message? There's a few things that make you raise some eyebrows. Henry Drews is a longtime fisheries manager in Northwest Minnesota. He had a recent letter in Outdoor News regarding the restructuring of these management offices. So he'll be offering his opinions on what is happening and what could happen. He'll join us later in the show. And when we come back, Joe Henry will talk about the importance of hosting events for veterans right after this.
The best deals of the year on fall hunting gear are coming.
The Woods Fall Outdoor Expo is back at the Woods in Warroad, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, September 9th, 10th, and 11th. And this year, the world's largest novice goose calling contest takes place Saturday, September 11th, with over $10,000 in prizes. North American goose calling champion Coy Loeffler will be giving seminars starting at noon, with the contest kicking off at 2. The Woods Outdoor Expo is back, September 9th through the 11th at the Woods in Warroad. Learn more at thewoodsgoods.com. Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com. All right, well, the military's been a topic of discussion for a lot of people lately. And with recent events taking place in the news, it makes the veteran support groups and the veteran support events that much more important. And a big one took place recently up at Lake of the Woods. And to tell us more about it, we're going to welcome Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism on the show. Joe, how you doing?
Hi, Brett. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. Pay It Forward has been going for a number of years now, and I got to see some of your pictures and videos from social media here recently. It looks like it was another good event up there.
Oh, boy, I'll tell you what. Just so good and for the right reasons. This is a 7th annual Pay It Forward Veterans event put on by the Lake of the Woods community, and, it wouldn't be possible with lots of generous sponsors, including the resorts themselves, putting up lodging and meals and charter trips and other sponsors as well. The purpose of our event is to honor, recognize, and celebrate all veterans. And I'll tell you, there's still a lot of pain out there. There's still a lot of issues. There is still veterans need support, and they need the resources. And we can't have enough veterans events, from my opinion. We just, it's so important. So many good things have happened. We create the environment, but the magic of this program is veteran having the opportunity to rub elbows with other veterans.
Yeah. 7 years. I can't believe it's been going for 7 years already. And, without getting into specifics, but I assume the headlines were a big topic of discussion up there this week.
They were, yeah. We knew coming in that Afghanistan was going to be a sensitive topic, and it was bringing up, heck, Brett, Afghanistan brings up emotion in myself, and I'm not a veteran.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how it affects people that have been there, done that, especially if they've been in Afghanistan, even when they haven't been. They just fought for our country. And yeah, so we addressed it. We had some of our guest speakers who are veterans, and they had a chance to address it up front. And, we talked about it, and there's some conversations going on the side, but we want to make sure that we're honoring our veterans all the time during elevated times like right now, as well as in times that there's not much going on. And most people are real good about doing that. We talk about our Vietnam vets, how they didn't get the welcome they deserved coming home, and how, they need that now. And I can go through the whole, without getting into details. It's really, really good to support our veterans. It's important to understand that nothing is free, that there are great sacrifices that have been made so we have the freedoms that we have in the United States of America. For people that served stateside, didn't go overseas, and didn't have to be in the battle, those people are still very instrumental and very important to America and to our freedoms. And everybody who's been a veteran deserves recognition and kudos for what they've done.
So I know it's been said a lot, but it's important to just keep reinforcing the fact that those that did serve in Afghanistan, thank you very much. Proud of what you did, and it was important work that you did. And man, it's been hard to watch what's happened lately. But Joe, you've got veterans of all ages that were a part of this event up there, right?
We do, yeah. And I'll tell you what, Brett, the Afghanistan issue affects certainly people that were in Afghanistan, but it affects all the veterans, and it affects lay people too. It's very people that care about the military care about this topic, and we purposely try to get diversity amongst our group each year. So we get men and women, we get people from different branches of the military, different age groups, just really make it diverse, and that's part of the magic. It's so cool to see younger veterans hanging out with older veterans, and the admiration and the respect, and it's just a good thing, and it's a healthy thing. It's a healing thing.
It's fun to watch some of those younger veterans and those older veterans get into discussions because they're having a discussion that most of the people on the planet can't relate to, and it's going to be one of those discussions that only those two people really know what they're talking about, as well as their other fellow servicemen and women, of course. But it's fun to watch them open up and have a dialogue with somebody who went through something fairly similar, and that's what these events bring to people like that.
Absolutely. We say veterans spending time with other veterans, and like some of the veterans will tell us that it's veterans understand, and they understand what it was like. They understand the talk. It's just out of respect, walk a mile in my shoes kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how was the fishing?
Fishing was really good. We caught lots and lots of walleyes on our boat. We shot a show for Midwest Outdoors TV yesterday, and with our veterans, and fishing was really good. I talked to the other boats. Everybody caught fish. Some boats were limited out by 12:30 in the afternoon. It was great. Some boats, we pulled cranks behind downriggers. The majority of the boats were drifting with spinners. It was calm yesterday, so they were, they didn't drift much. They almost had to kick the charter boat in and out of gear to get some movement. In the afternoon, we got a little bit of wind, and actually the fishing picked up when we got that burst of wind. But no, fishing was great. We happened to be fishing. We went north, and we're fishing up kind of in a Little Traverse Bay to the east of Little Oak, out in that mud. Some of the charter boats were on the South Basin catching fish, and there's pods of fish all over the place. And I will tell you this, Brett. The things they are changing. I mean, it's September, start of September now, and tell you what, I'm seeing big flocks of geese flying south on the river already. We're seeing swans. I just spoke to a guy this morning, and he was sleeping because he was catching emerald shiners in the river last night.
Yeah, well, we might be heading up there here in about a week or so for there's a big calling contest at the Woods and War Road over there, and we're debating if we come up, and I'm not 100% sure if we come up because Joe, as you know, the Aglow conference is coming up, so maybe heading over to Michigan here, but we're debating on going up there and taking part of this calling contest that's taking place. And then do we bring the boat and try to do some fishing? Do we go out and try to chase some ducks around well, I guess ducks aren't open yet, but do we try to chase some grouse around or try to chase some geese around, or do we just go up and check out the contest? It's hard to go up there and not go fishing on Lake of the Woods, Joe.
Tell you what, fishing's been great. And with those shiners running in the river, we're already getting reports of some walleyes being in the river. Those walleyes aren't far behind. Somebody showed me a video this morning, and it was from last year, but a school of emerald shiners with a big walleye coming up at night.
Oh boy.
And whacking a few of them.
That's
All
cool.
the minnows jumped out of the water. Just those are cool things, and that kind of thing is happening right now. And it's always one of those things where when's a shiner run going to start?
Right.
When's it? How hard is it going to be? And the shiners are going to run heavy. They're going to not run heavy. And what ends up happening is, by the time you hear about it, it's over. You almost had to be here.
Might as well just live there, right? I mean, might as well. Then you don't have to go far. Joe, if somebody does want to live up there or just travel up there and visit maybe yet this fall or make an ice fishing trip plan now, what should they do for more info?
You know what? On a short-term basis, check out our Lake of the Woods Tourism's Facebook page or Instagram. Otherwise, check out our website, and that is lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today. Well, our region here in the United States is rich with natural resources. If you like to hunt and fish, it's probably why you live here. Maybe not, but you should enjoy the natural resources we have here if you do live here. And in Minnesota, we have a lot of opportunities that a lot of the other hunters and anglers around the United States don't have. I've traveled a lot across the U.S. up into Canada. I've traveled down to South America, chasing birds and animals and fish around. And it's pretty interesting when you talk to people from other parts of the world, really, and you tell them all the opportunities that we have here in Minnesota. We're really fortunate, and a lot of us take it for granted. So it's important to make sure that we manage those resources properly. And I know our DNR gets a lot of criticism in Minnesota. Sometimes it's rightfully so. Sometimes it's people, I think, that just like to complain. But the future of the DNR is something that we all need to keep an eye on. And the way the DNR is managed, the way the DNR is run, the way it's funded is an important topic. And recently, there was a press release that came out that said a new funding structure, new funding mechanisms. I can't remember how they worded it exactly, but the DNR wants to find some new ways to fund things. Well, Henry Drews is now a retired fisheries manager from Northwest Minnesota, and he joins us here on the show. Henry, how you doing? Yeah, thanks for coming on. You wrote a letter that appeared in Outdoor News. You wrote an article for Outdoor News, and that was forwarded to me. I went around to a bunch of people. I had it sent to me from a number of different people that talked about some potential issues with this new funding proposal, or whatever you want to call it, that the DNR is coming out with. So I want to get your opinions on it, what you think might be coming down the line, what your concerns are, and whether or not we should be worried about it. But first, let's just get a little bit of background. You worked for the DNR for what, 35 years or so, is that right? And what did you do?
I was a regional fisheries manager for the past 23 years, and I held other positions prior to that. But for the last 23 years, I've been the regional manager in the northwest part of the state, responsible for all the fisheries operations, basically the whole northwest quarter, from the Manitoba border down the Dakota border, down to Alexandria, and including significant waters like Leech Lake, Upper Red, Lake of the Woods, and Cass Lake. So it's been a great ride. I had a wonderful time, tremendous staff, and some real resource challenges, and it's just been fantastic.
That northwest part of Minnesota is so unique because it's kind of that prairie country. You're starting get into northern Minnesota. It almost feels like you're in Canada when you're in like prairie Canada when you're in parts of it. You got moose, wolves, and bear running around in prairie type landscapes. And I've got some friends that live up there, and I go up there and I always talk to them about how I feel like there's no water around here. So you guys don't have any lakes up here. I don't think of there being a lot of lakes up there, but in your northwest region, you had some of the biggest lakes in the state, some of the more major lakes that we have: Lake of the Woods, Red Lake, Leech Lake, and Cass. Oh yeah, and probably the Red River then too, I suppose.
Yeah, it includes the Red River and also the Rainy River. So we've got everything on the fish end, from muskies to sturgeon to the best channel catfish river in North America, and brook trout streams and brown trout streams, some of the best walleye fishing in the whole state, and the pan fishing is just unbelievable. So yeah, it's quite the resource. And like you said, if you're an outdoors person, whether you just hunt or just fish or do both like myself and you do, it's nirvana. to be able to live up here. It's been a true privilege to work and have a hand in the managing the sport fisheries up here.
Well, I tell you what, like you talk to the Mille Lacs guys and you feel sorry for them sometimes for what they're dealing with over there. But you've obviously dealt with similar type situations. And then when you talk about having to deal with a river like the Red River and go through the flooding situations that you had to deal with there, when you talk about the Rainy River and the sturgeon recovery up there and just managing walleye populations on Lake of the Woods, and then the Red Lake situation, you probably deserve a medal for going through what you went through on Red Lake up there. Just briefly describe how that situation went for you.
Well, in the mid 90s, the Red Lake walleye population crashed. There was essentially not enough reproducing fish left in that population to sustain itself, to recover itself. So together, the DNR and the Red Lake Band of Chippewa worked together to develop a recovery plan. And that recovery plan included a complete harvest moratorium for a period of time, and then an aggressive short-term stocking program and rigorous enforcement. And just 7 years into it, we were able to reopen that fishery. And since that time, we've been able to manage that fishery as an absolute gem. And I can't say enough for the partnership that we've developed with the Red Lake Band. We have been hand in glove with the tribe on all steps of management of that fishery since it reopened. And I think the future of Red Lake is extremely promising.
So 7 years is pretty remarkable. When you came up with the plan to close fishing, to start that plan of recovery, what was the reception you got from the fishing public here in Minnesota?
Well, at that time, the band closed their fishery completely in 1998, and the state closed the state waters in 1999. We signed the agreement with the tribe to recover that fishery in April of 1999. And we weren't sure how long it would need to be closed. We consulted with the public, the businesses. There weren't very many businesses left in the Washakish area, and we sat down with them and talked about we can either use a semi-aggressive approach. It might take longer, it may not work, or we can go for the aggressive approach, and that would be a complete harvest closure. And so we were able to work with the remaining businesses and other constituents to go for it with the most aggressive approach, and we were successful. The fishery responded to the 3 stockings we did in 1999, 2001, and 2003 better than we could have anticipated, and we were able to see that recovery advance, at a rather rapid rate. We started working on a harvest management plan in 2005, and then also what an opener would look like. And so in 2006 at midnight on the fishing opener, history was made, and we reopened that resource after 7 years. And I think the rest is, as they say, history. I certainly had a role in it, but I must mention that, it was a team effort all along, a large team of DNR employees, and of course the natural resources staff from the Red Lake Band. No one person would deserve a medal, as you might have suggested.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
It was an absolute teamwork, and I can't say enough for how great it's been working with the Red Lake Band.
What do you think caused that situation, and what is going to be what was put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Well, we have a harvest plan. What caused it was overharvest, and that was overharvest by both tribal and state users. And when we embarked on the recovery, it was really important that we decided that we were not going to focus our energy on fixing blame. We were going to focus our energy on fixing the problem. And so that's where we put all of our energies. The safeguards moving forward to prevent that from occurring again is a well-crafted management plan, a framework to determine how and when we need to adjust harvest, and then implementing that, and rigorous enforcement by both jurisdictions.
So when you look at what you went through with Red Lake and you look at what's going on with Mille Lacs now and obviously for the past few years, what similarities do you see between the two?
Well, the similarities are that multiple jurisdictions need to work together, and that's the only real similarity. Upper Red Lake, Lower Red Lake are far different systems than Mille Lacs. Ecologically, they're quite different. The Red Lakes have a very simple fish community. The fish community in Mille Lacs is much more diverse. The intensity of use on Mille Lacs and the potential being so close to the metro area is different than what we see on Red Lake. And so the challenge of regulating a limited harvest on Mille Lacs is much more complex than on Red. The similarities are that people love walleye. They love to keep walleye. And it's the management challenge is how to allocate that resource. With Red Lake, we have two entities we work on allocation with. That's the Red Lake Band and the state of Minnesota. On Mille Lacs, the fisheries managers are not only working with the Mille Lacs Band, but they're working with the Wisconsin bands. And it's way more complex because there's more players in the system. There's also the effect of invasive species that we have on Mille Lacs and we don't have on Red to this date. Zebra mussels are present on Red, but they've not yet expanded to have an impact on the fish community. So they're vastly different. There are some similarities, and the challenges are unique, I think, to each lake. You can't just draw conclusions from one lake and apply it to the other.
If only you could just shoot some cormorants and fix the problem.
Well, if cormorants were the problem on Mille Lacs, that'd be an easy solution.
Right. Well, that's an amazing story about leech, though, and how, I mean, that's really what brought the walleyes back, right? Bringing some sharpshooters out there.
Well, that was, again, we started that effort in the mid 2000s, and things weren't going real well on leech, and I'll admit that we did not in the early 2000s think that cormorants could be as large a villain as they turned out to be. There was no published literature anywhere in the United States that a burgeoning cormorant population could affect sport fish to the level that we were able to document. Once we had the documentation in place, we worked with the Leech Lake Band, and as they own the islands where the birds are roosting, and we worked with them and got approval from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to control the cormorants. Again, it was a partnership. It was the state of Minnesota and the Leech Lake Band in this case, and the feds, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we were able to implement a tool in that situation that has proven to be very effective. We also had a short-term stocking program there that for a couple of years it contributed. And then we used regulations in an adaptive way for an initial time to protect the remaining brood stock, and then we relax those regulations as we move forward, as the fish population, told us that we could harvest more fish. So we've continually adjusted regulations on red and leech to match the pressures that those fisheries are under.
Most hated bird in the world. That's I think pretty accurate. Do you know about that cormorant season? What's in Ontario started a cormorant season? Is that where it was? You can hunt them up there.
Yeah, I did hear that. I guess I wonder how much participation they actually had.
Who knows?
In Minnesota, we have a wanton waste law that you have to utilize anything you shoot or anything you catch and harvest. And I don't know exactly how that played out in Ontario, but while there might have been some fun involved in that, it was fair. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to grill up any cormorant anytime soon. I want to ask you about one more of the big lakes that you were a part of up there, and that's Lake of the Woods. And obviously there's been some changes when it comes to limits the last couple of years, and there's some concern about the amount of angling hours on that lake, particularly in the winter. Do you foresee more limits coming, more restrictive limits coming to that lake?
Well, I'm gonna defer that to the folks that are managing that lake now up on the border. That's Phil Talmadge is the area supervisor, and he's outstanding. Up until the time I retired, all of the data we had suggested, one, that winter pressure is growing. The last 2 years have been record high. However, the harvest hasn't been record high. It kind of was self-regulating from the standpoint, the more people you have up there, they have to share the pie, and individual slice of the pie is smaller. But we have a rigorous monitoring program up there. We survey that lake every year, a real robust gill netting program. And we we have the data. We take all the biological parameters we need to keep our pulse on that population, kind of like when you go in and get a physical, whether it's a blood test and they look at all the micronutrients in your blood and your iron level and take your pulse and your blood pressure. We're doing that on Lake of the Woods every year. And at this point in time, there is no cause for an alarm, no need for an abrupt regulation change. I think you're showing the viewers our management plan up there. We have a citizens input group that we work with. We meet with them every year. We go through the annual monitoring data. And I think we have the data that will help us tell when we need to pull the trigger on different regulations. And as of my point of retirement, a month ago, we were not at that juncture. To need to make more regulation changes up there. Certainly, we're going to continue with the creel surveys in the winter and periodically in the summer. We're going to track harvest, and we're going to continue to do our annual monitoring. But I do not see an abrupt course correction at this time. The biological data just does not suggest that's necessary.
I wanted to ask you about all these lakes, and because I'm interested in your opinion on them, and they're very important to anglers in the region, not just Minnesota, but in the region, or really from all over the country that travel to fish these walleye factories. But I also wanted our listeners and our viewers who may not be familiar with your history, your work, and who you are, just to get a little background so they know where you're coming from when it comes to your opinions on what's going on with the DNR and where we're headed in the future. So you've probably known about this before all of us because you obviously were working with the DNR, so you probably heard that there was going to be some talk of restructuring before we saw the press release about it. Where do you think that's coming from, and do you think we need to change things up?
Well, Brett, there's two different things that you're talking about here. There's a Division of Fish and Wildlife is looking at restructuring. That's issue number one. The second issue is a broad-based looking at funding options for the long term for the agency. The former is what I'll focus on. The latter I think it's a great idea. The agency needs to look at broad-based funding opportunities for all the divisions, whether it's for public water access, whether it's for state parks or fish and wildlife management. So they are two distinct entities. The funding challenge and the funding ideas that are going to be talked about over the coming years, I think is fantastic. And kudos to Sarah Stroman for initiating a conversation about longer term funding for the agency and for all the divisions. The first issue, though, is the restructuring or reorganization. That is specific to the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and it's a project that was initiated approximately 2 years ago. So that, I think, is what we should focus our conversation on.
Okay, all right. What was the plan, or what are they talking about doing?
Well, like I said, the conversation started in the middle of 2019 about how we best organize or structure the Division of Fish and Wildlife. I and a number of my colleagues, some that are still working and some that have since retired like myself, expressed concern in 2019. In the early part of this process, that some of the ideas they were talking about, didn't make sense. We did not think they were good ideas. And those ideas would include merging the regional fisheries manager and regional wildlife manager positions in each of the regions, merging the research manager positions for fisheries and wildlife, merging the operations manager positions for both fish and wildlife, and possibly even including merging the chief of fisheries and chief of wildlife positions. So we, in 2019 and then early 2020, a number of us managers put our concerns in writing and shared those with the division director and those involved in the reorganization discussion. And those were that one, you don't embark on a discussion about reorganization until you identify the problem it is that you're trying to fix. And that still, to this date, to my knowledge, has not been clearly defined. So it has been, since its inception, searching for a solution in the absence of identified problem. And that's the concerns. And the other concern I have is that there was, at no point in the process was there any discussion about the need to include the public, our angling and hunting publics in this discussion. It wasn't until after I retired and wrote a commentary in Outdoor News, and John Williams, my colleague from wildlife in the region, made some comments in his retirement interviews. Did we at all hear anything about a public process to get input from the public? And the question is, why is this important? Why is it important to anglers? One, the fisheries profession and the wildlife profession, while there are commonalities, they are distinctly different. When we go to college, we get trained different. We take different classes. We have areas of expertise and specialization. And I believe that the anglers and the hunters in the state want that specialization all the way up to the managerial positions, because we deal with the issues. Our previous dialogue here on this interview, we talked about managing Red Lake, Leech Lake, Lake of the Woods. I was personally involved as a regional fisheries manager in each of those, as were the staff that I supervised. The public that we work with on our input groups got to hear specifically and directly from me as the manager in Northwest Minnesota, fisheries trained, fisheries experience. If they merged my position, for example, with the regional wildlife position, manager position, it's quite possible that the person they would speak to when an issue emerges or a challenge emerges would be somebody trained in wildlife. Conversely, it could be if it was a regional fisheries person that became the manager for both fish and wildlife in the Northwest region, then I would be dealing with CWD response in Beltrami County right now.
Oh boy.
It's simply not a good idea to meld and merge the managerial positions in the Division of Fish and Wildlife. Not only will it have an impact on the delivery of conservation programs, it starts to blur the lines of budget between the two units. And I think that that's something that's arguably extremely important to both our anglers and our hunters, to have those discrete budgets and be able to be accountable to our anglers and our hunters on the use of those budgets.
You think the idea was just a staffing question or a budget question of having to pay two people for that position just to save some money, just pay one to do it?
I think that's part of the concept. The justification for this has been, one, there's a bunch of vacancies. Two, we need to look at efficiencies. Well, I think if you looked at what a regional wildlife manager does and look at what the regional fisheries manager does in one location, there are no economies of scale. We're clearly both fully employed. There's enough issues in all of the regions for, and I'm just speaking of the regional manager jobs, there's enough issues to keep us fully employed and keep on top of issues as they're emerging. That the idea of combining those two positions into a single position means the people planning to do that don't really have a very good understanding of the jobs.
Right. So, I mean, obviously you want people that are in charge of some of these regions and in charge of biologists in the field to know what they're talking about when they're out there talking to people. And I guess the bigger picture, and this comes into that when you start talking about funding as well, why are we underfunded? Like, I know there's talk of decreasing participation in the outdoors, and I feel like we've reversed that trend in a big way the last couple of years. So is the overall picture still bleak? Are they worried that participation is going to drop off sharply after this pandemic situation that we're in? Or are there some other efficiencies? Are we funding programs that maybe aren't as necessary? I mean, obviously fisheries and wildlife have to be number one and number two priorities, or number one and number one priorities, maybe however you want to look at it. But where are the inefficiencies?
I think the long-term funding considerations are real. The trajectory, if you look nationally, in license sales for both hunting and fishing across the country are down. The Minnesota is bucking that tradition or that observation on a national scale. Our fishing license sales in Minnesota are very strong, and they've been very stable. Hunting license sales in Minnesota, though, are on a different trajectory. They're heading downwards, the last 2 years being an aberration. So there are concerns. Are we doing the work we do the most efficient way we can? Those are fantastic questions.
Yeah.
And those are things we should always be looking at. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. But to jump immediately into reorganization, I think, is premature.
Go ahead. Well, let me ask you this question. When it comes to license sales and this decline, I should have done more research before I asked this question. But when you look back at the history of the DNR and the history of license sales, I mean, really, what do we have? 75 years of history, approximately. Where? I mean, did we have an unnatural peak in there? Are we coming back down to where we probably should be, or do you think it's an unreal expectation to stay as high as we were when we don't really have that much history to judge a trend in the license sales?
Right. You know, and I'm not an expert in this area, whether it be marketing or whether it be, you know, the data mining from license sales. But what I do know is that the strongest period of our license sales occurred, you know, and lasted from post-World War II, you know, through the baby boom generation. And a lot of the baby boomers are timing out.
Yeah.
I'm on the latter part of that curve. The baby boomers, you know, are the largest buyers of licenses, you know, particularly, you know, in the hunting, and they're starting to phase out. And there aren't enough younger hunters and anglers coming into being recruited to replace them. So the tables, you know, you look at it's not a longevity table, but the actuary kind of tables of participation. You got to need as many replacements to come in to replace those that are timing out, and that's not happening. It's more acute with hunting license sales than it is with fishing license sales.
Sure.
It's just that much more difficult to get young people involved in hunting because you need to mentor them. It's a lot more difficult to mentor hunting than it is angling.
Yeah,
so the declines are real, and the 75-year time period is enough to give us cause for concern, given the trajectory that we see.
Well, there's definitely some more barriers of entry for hunting out there. But, you know, when we went dove hunting here this week on opener, every single piece of state land had hunters all over it. So I don't always see the decline when I'm out there in the field trying to find a place to hunt. And you know, land access and places to go obviously is one of those barriers for everybody. And I know for a fact some people have quit hunting because sometimes it's hard to find land to get on. You don't have the, you know, everybody and their neighbors used to hunt everybody and their neighbor's property back in the day. And you just don't have that anymore because people are managing for deer, planting food plots, or whatever the case may be. So I think it's an interesting discussion why there might be a decline out there. Whatever the reason, obviously we need to continue to find ways to fund because it's like a user fee essentially to pay for that management. But you know, maybe this isn't a question for you necessarily, but I've always been a proponent since our natural resources are as important as they are for us in this state economically, the amount of money generated from hunting and fishing in Minnesota is in the billions. Should more money from the general fund go to managing our resources and less about user fees? Could that be one of the ways to solve a funding issue?
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be in the mix with this new group that Sarah Stroman has asked to look at options.
Good.
And I think that's very good. We used to get, you know, 25, 30 years ago, a fair bit of general fund money. And I know, for example, a lot of that was used to pay for conservation officer salaries, you know, and so there are a lot of ideas that should be explored. And again, kudos to Commissioner Stroman for putting a group together to see what options are out there. From my perspective, you know, the people that buy hunting and fishing licenses don't just pay for those management programs. As a fisheries manager, we're doing environmental review. We're issuing permits to protect habitat, you know, from aquatic plant management destruction. There's a lot of things that we do in fish and wildlife that are to the benefit for water quality and for recreation that, you know, may be benefiting people that don't buy licenses. So it's a logical reach to think that a broader segment of our population should be contributing to our natural resource management programs.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. I know they've tried to tax some of that equipment and you know, bird watchers, hikers, whatever it is, you know, like a Pittman Robertson or something like that. And it hasn't really gone over very well. So getting people to pay to go walk a WMA, you know, or bird watch or whatever the case may be, I think is going to be a bit of a struggle out there. I'm all for getting some of those people to pay their fair share if they're going to utilize those resources. And, you know, I don't know how well that would go over. But yeah, I think it should be fair for everybody if you're going to be using it.
I think the key, anytime like when we go out and ask for a hunting and fishing license fee increase, the key is to be honest and explain exactly what the need is and how it'll be used. We passed the Outdoor Heritage Act in Minnesota on during a time when we were in real budget straits. It was not a good time for the economy, and no one thought it could pass, but it did. It passed because the need was identified, the uses were clearly delineated, and the public responded. So I think anytime you ask more people to help pay for something, I think it's a matter of being straightforward and honest on what the needs are and how you're going to use it, and then be accountable for how you use it.
Well, I just want to make sure. I guess my biggest concern with some sort of big type of restructuring or new funding mechanisms, essentially, is that things just. I don't want to say things stay the same because that won't sound right. But I don't want major changes to the outdoor opportunities that I enjoy, the hunting and fishing opportunities, because they're pretty unique to us here in Minnesota. I mean, yeah, some states have maybe better this or better that, but for a variety of hunting and angling opportunities in Minnesota, we're pretty fortunate with what we have for resources. And I don't want my opportunities diminished when it comes to where I can fish, where I can hunt, things like that. And I know nobody's talking about that, but anytime you start to discuss changing something or other, or including this or that, or doing this, and all of a sudden we have to listen to what they want to do, and maybe all of a sudden these bird watchers or these hikers want this WMA because there's a rare shorebird or something on there, then all of a sudden now hunting's going to be restricted there. I understand everybody has a right to public property. I'm not trying to diminish that fact at all, but I want to make sure that some of those opportunities, because you restrict that and you're going to lose more hunters again as it goes. So that's one of my biggest concerns. So let's get away from the funding again, because I know your biggest concerns were with the merging of these departments. So what do you think? What do you foresee happening? When do you think these changes could happen? And let's talk solutions. What do you think the department should do?
Well, the timeline that I understand is that the discussions are going on internally right now in October, and there's a commitment to get some public input between October and the first of the year. And it's my understanding that the division director, Dave Oldfelt, would like to make these changes, if there are any, by the first of the year.
Quickly.
So that's my understanding of the timeline. My crystal ball, where do I see it going? I think once you start an endeavor like this, you're not going to come to a conclusion that nothing should be changed. I think there's going to be some changes. I hope that they're changes that are smart, that are based on a clearly defined objectives, and I hope it's not change for the sake of change.
Yeah.
I hope that we keep in mind that for a strong division of Fish and Wildlife, it's an analogy like a football team. You have a good football team, has a strong offense and has a strong defense. You have people that are specialized on offense, like a middle linebacker. You have or defense. You have a specialization in a fullback or a running back. You don't combine those positions and say we're going to be more efficient and combine the middle linebacker with the running back. You don't do that. Same in the division of Fish and Wildlife. You don't combine managers because you think one manager can do both. I think the anglers and the hunters in this state expect to have professionally trained people at all of the managerial positions up to the division director level. I hope they look around and look at South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, our adjacent states, and see that they've retained a system where the wildlife line of authority and the fisheries lines of authority are discrete and separate up to the division director level. There's a reason all the other states are maintaining a bifurcated structure up to the division director. And it's a reason why Minnesota has done that. It works. And so to start monkeying with something so fundamental to the delivery of conservation programs, I think is a grave mistake.
Well, we have some great biologists in the state, and they went to school for this. They have a passion for it. They specialize, as you mentioned, in their areas, and we need to make sure that they can do their job the best way possible in those areas as well.
We need to have leadership in the agency that supports the delivery of programs at the area office level and the regional office level, whether it's the fisheries research unit, the habitat unit, or whether it's the management or hatchery staff. We need to have clear lines of professionally trained individuals from the field all the way up to the managerial levels, and seek to hire the very best people to do those jobs that are professionally trained to do that specific type of work. I think that's what all the professionals in the state of Minnesota want. I think that's why they got into it in the first place. Many of us started angling and hunting as small kids, and we pursued it as a profession, and we want to continue to do that. And we're all very, very dedicated to the delivery of fish and wildlife programs to the hunters and anglers, because we do that ourselves. We are all hunters and anglers, and it's ingrained in us to do our best job.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to make sure that we can fund those positions, of course, and full-time positions year-round, 12 months out of the year, to do their jobs where they need to do them and do the jobs right. What we had some vacancies in some of those regional offices, correct? And that was partly why this discussion came up at this time?
Yes, that's a fact, that they're holding all those vacancies in the managerial positions until they reach decisions. Some of those manager vacancies were actually in place prior to the pandemic, as early as 2019. So somebody's had some ideas about where this is heading that long ago. This is not something new. It's not a new idea. I'll tell you, there's a cost to holding so many field positions and manager positions vacant and have people in acting positions. It's burning people out. Morale is down, and there's concern over why those positions are being held and why they're not being filled. And that's creating some of the consternation about, what is the outcome of this going to be?
Why aren't they being filled?
They're not being filled because they want to leadership wants to maintain their options, whether they want to combine positions or not. They want to keep those positions there, those options available for them.
Interesting. Well,
that in itself raises some of the suspicion of what the intentions are.
Well, we could probably talk about how the DNR should be run for hours and maybe days, and have all sorts of opinions on it. But it's a pretty important discussion.
Well, Bret, don't get me wrong here. I have great pride in the organization.
Sure.
The Division of Fish and Wildlife, I had a wonderful career. There's a large number of incredibly talented people in the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and it'd be really nice for them to be able to focus on doing their jobs, making habitat better, stocking fish, doing surveys. They'd sure rather be focusing on that than worrying about whether or not they're going to be reporting to somebody that's not trained in their discipline. It'd be nice to get this off the table and move forward.
Well, I know it's been a tough couple of years just in itself going through the pandemic, and I know a lot of people were stuck indoors when they should have been outside working, in my personal opinion. I mean, outside, away from the people, out in the middle of nowhere seems like the perfect place to be during a pandemic, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, we need people to be out there doing their job and doing it right, and not having to worry about things that don't really matter to them very much. So, all right. Well, I hope things work out the way you want them to work out, because I agree. I think that's an important way for us to go and for things to move forward. But I appreciate you coming on here and telling us your concerns and your opinions, and also your thoughts. I agree that some of the people in the DNR, I think the DNR has done a good job in a lot of ways overall, but there's, you're not going to win them all. So there's always going to be some positives and negatives here and there, and everybody's going to, I feel for you guys who have to make some of these decisions, because I guarantee you that you've gotten some emails that are probably not as positive at times throughout your career, and that's tough to have to deal with.
Well, when you're a public servant, that's just part of the job, Bret. And the key is you may not like to hear some of that stuff, but ultimately, at the end of the day, when you listen to your critics as closely as you listen to your supporters, you're going to make better decisions. That's just a fact, and that's the life of a public servant, and we take that pretty seriously.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that there's people passionate about our outdoors here. Yeah, I know you were busy. I wanted to have you on the show last week, but you were out there taking advantage of a pretty unique outdoor opportunity here in Minnesota. You were harvesting wild rice.
Yes, my wife got me into harvesting wild rice about 10 years ago. You can see in the background there, let me see, there, a
There it
canoe
is.
full of rice. That was one of the tribal members she worked with on her PhD. But wild ricing in the fall is now a big part of our life. We spend a couple of weeks every fall out harvesting rice. She's taught me how to do it and got me out in the boat with her, and we really, really enjoy it. To me, it's the kickoff of the fall season. It's the transition from fishing to the fall gathering. And you start with the wild rice, and next is sharp-tailed grouse on the North Dakota prairie, and ducks in South Dakota, and then the deer season rolls around, and then there's pheasants, and it's just an amazing time of the year. And wild rice harvest kicks it off, and we gift a lot of rice. I give it to landowners where I hunt, and it's just a special time to be out there with the young wood ducks and the teal and the Sora rails and everything else that's out there. Great time.
Best time of the year, and as a fisheries guy, you should mention that fishing is pretty good this time of year too, but it's always a struggle, and I tend to always just bring the shotgun and leave the fishing rod at home, but those fishing opportunities are pretty good.
Brett, that's been my angle here for the last 15 years, and but now that I have a little more time on my hands, I'm not going to winterize my boat on Labor Day weekend anymore.
And speaking of angles, that canoe paddle that you got, what is that? Bending branches? Is that what those were called? Is that what you got? Yeah,
that's correct. And technically, to be fair, that's my wife's special paddle. I'm not allowed to use it.
Well, I have a couple of those. We grew up with those on our Boundary Waters trips, using those paddles all the time. So.
Yeah, I actually bought a couple of my younger daughter and I did a couple of triathlons with canoeing, and we bought some graphite bent shaft paddles. Once you use one of those, you'll never use a wooden paddle again.
I bet. I had some sore arms and shoulders, and lots of blisters on those trips, of course, up there.
We were talking about wild rice. This year's been particularly tough with the low water.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, about half of the rivers and lakes we normally harvest, we can't even put a boat in. So it's been tough on the harvesters. It's going to be tough on duck hunters, putting boats out on some of those waters. So
for sure.
But every year is different. Just like whether it's bow hunting or duck hunting, you got to scout. And if you scout for wild rice, you'll find some places to get
Scouting is the number one piece of advice I give anybody when they ask me about hunting pheasants, ducks, geese, whatever. Scouting is always number one. Got to find it.
Well, it's as important to put the time in on that as it is to take the time off to go.
Yeah, for sure. People don't give themselves enough time. A lot of times they just go on the weekend or whatever. They don't give themselves time to scout. And if you give yourself an extra day, and your experience is going to be that much better. All right, Henry Drews, good luck with everything, and thanks for the time today on the show.
Absolute, Brett. It's been a pleasure joining you.
Enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.